It's another Saturday here in our studios, broadcasting from Accra, and I welcome you to another episode of the Hangout debate. This is an interactive session where we engage young minds on pertinent local and international issues and try and solicit and elicit their opinions in this respect, and further a discourse to ensure that more young people are engaged in topical issues for national development and our growth as a country. Today we are discussing a very important issue. Recently, there has been agitations by sections of people living in some areas of the Volta region and amongst other parts of the country for a complete secession from the Republic of Ghana. These people argue that based on the historical narrative and perspective, it is important that we grant them independence as British Togoland, and they've created some amount of chaos, especially in the lead up to the 2020 election. In today's discussion, we're engaging two fine young men on what the position of the government should be, whether it should be a clampdown now or a negotiable or negotiation process with these individuals in respect of their crimes that they are committing and the mayhem they may be causing in the country. To provide some context for today's discussion, in 1956 a plebiscite was held where the trusteeship under which the UN trusted the British Togoland area into the Britain's care under the arrangements, the colonial arrangement between Britain and France, a situation arose where 6 districts, namely Pando, Ho, Boem, Krachi, Mampusi and Dagbon, were given the opportunity to decide if they wanted to join the newly independent Ghana or form their own state, or even wait until their independent status had been determined before they would proceed. By majority share, many of these individuals decided they want to be part of the Republic of Ghana. Several years down the line, there seems to be a growing concern as to whether or not these people feel fully integrated into the Republic or they deserve to form a state sovereign and one that exists in and of itself. That bears today's discussion. We have invited Mr. Joseph Mireku, who won last week's competition and last week's debate session, to argue for the military clampdown in respect of the strong-handed negotiations or strong-handed tactics that government needs to employ in dealing with these individuals. Mr. Nii Komey of the University of Ghana dissents. He argues that with regard to the nature of the conversation that needs to be had with these individuals, a clampdown will not inure to the benefit of the Republic of Ghana, and will be left worse off if we decide to go with the approach Mr. Joseph Mireku will propose. In today's session, we have slightly altered the format. Both speakers will be entitled to 10 minutes to provide their substantive speeches, 5 minutes for responses, and then they will have 3 minutes for engagement with your questions and then their respective conclusions. Today promises to be a very interactive session. We expect you to stay locked and stay on the stream. Remember that the Hangout is brought to you exclusively by the Speech Forces organization in collaboration with Media Inc. Today's episode has been sponsored by Quidex, and I'll be telling you much about Quidex later in our stream. Ladies and gentlemen, very soon we shall start today's session, and I invite you to take your seats and enjoy today's debate session. My name is Joel Telfa, and once again I welcome you to the Hangout.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joseph, and as Telfa has already said, we are here this evening to discuss an issue that speaks to the very heart and the very foundation of Ghanaians living everywhere. But before we proceed, I'm a Pujoba, and so I'm not feeling very good this evening, but please do bear with me, okay, during the course of this debate. So, what we are discussing today, ladies and gentlemen, is what should the government's position be when people in a state such as Ghana decide to succeed. And in the course of my debate, I'll tell you several things to justify why a military approach and a total military clampdown is the way to go in this regard. So, ladies and gentlemen, before said March 1957, before Mr. Kwame Nkrumah declared our nation Ghana free forever, there was no state as Ghana to which some strangers were added to. What we had were 4 distinct areas, namely the Gold Coast Crown Colony, the Ashanti Protectorate, the Northern Territories, and then British Togoland. So there was no Ghana that we had some foreigners being added onto, such that 50, 100 years down the line, these foreigners would now say they want to break away. We had a combination of 4 distinct states who came together to further a certain interest, and I'll tell you more about it. That means that the Ghana as we have it now is a compromise. Ghana is simply an agreement between these 4 distinct areas to subsume their individual interests and their individual identities in the furtherance of a universal interest or universal Ghanaian identity. Ladies and gentlemen, it is this agreement or this compromise which ensures that when we take gold or cocoa or timber from the forest regions of Ashanti, we are able to use these resources to develop and to upgrade the north. Ladies and gentlemen, it is this agreement which ensures that when we drill oil from the Western Cape, we do not just use it to develop the Western Cape, but we use it to pay the fees of children everywhere in Ghana. It is this same agreement which ensures that when we have resources from the north in the form of shea butter, which we sell and gain foreign exchange, we do not keep the proceeds in the north, but we use it to develop everywhere else. That means, ladies and gentlemen, that whatever advantages that inure to us as Ghanaians is as a result of that compromise that all these 4 distinct areas decided to agree to. So, any attempt to succeed or any attempt by any of these 4 regions to get out of that agreement is something which seeks to undermine the very foundations of the Ghanaian state and which seeks to break down the union that we enjoy as a Ghanaian state. And such a violent attempt to break off part of this unity is something that should be met with resistance, it should be challenged, it should be quashed, and it should be crushed with the full force of the state, i.e. through the arm of the military forces that we have at our disposal. Ladies and gentlemen, in this speech, I'll tell you 4 things. The first thing is to tell you that Ghana, as it is made up of 4 distinct areas. There is no original Ghana which somebody would now want to say they want to leave. Secondly, I'll give you principal justifications of why secession in itself is reprehensible, and in this particular instance, a military force is justified to prevent secession. Thirdly, I'll tell you why, even if secession were a good thing to do, Western Togoland particularly has no justification to want to secede from Ghana anytime, and particularly at this time. And lastly, I'll tell you why everything else which Nii will come and suggest to you will fail and is a waste of our time, and that the only way forward in resolving this matter once and for all has in its roots or in its foundation a military intervention and a military clampdown. So, ladies and gentlemen, to my substantive case. First one, we'll be looking at secession and its implications and the reason why we need to meet secession with the fullest force we have and not with kid gloves. So first thing, an attempt to succeed is an attack on the territorial integrity of Ghana, and I'll tell you why. Ghana is a state, among other things, because it is delimited by certain boundaries. Okay, we can clearly show that these are the boundaries of Ghana. Any attempt by a foreign power, say Germany or US or Togo or Cote d'Ivoire, to invade or to enter our territory is something that we take as an act of aggression. And so that is why we have the armed forces or the military to defend our borders. In the instance where someone living in Ghana, together with a few other people, wants to break down this territory, wants to carve out a certain part of this territory and then call it by a different name, which is Western Togoland, it is the same thing that is happening there. Whoever is leading that group wants to, as it were, invade the Ghanaian territory and then carve out a certain part for himself. That is an attack. That's an attack. It's an aggressive act upon the territorial integrity of Ghana, and that is why the armed forces need to be called and we need to have some military action, because that is the primary role of the military, to defend the territorial integrity of Ghana. And so it is justified to use the military when somebody wants to secede. Secondly, as I've already started telling you, what is happening in Western Togoland now is an act of aggression, and so it is justified that you have military response. especially such that the military response is proportionate and it is commensurate with whatever is happening there. We are not saying go into Western Togoland with guns and kill everybody, but the idea that it's something that demands military response should be very clear, because it's an attack on our territorial integrity, and it's something that we need to wipe out and then make sure that it doesn't happen again. Second part of my case is to tell you why a military intervention is very advantageous, or the benefits we get from a military intervention. First thing is that it demonstrates clearly to those people in Western Togoland who would want to do this, and everybody else, that we attach a high sense of severity and seriousness to whatever is happening there, and there's no way we are going to tolerate it. So it shows the high threat level of whatever is happening there, and that is why you need to call in the military, ladies and gentlemen, to demonstrate how important it is to us that this issue is quelled. Secondly, sending in the military ensures that the issue is drastically dealt with. We are able to quell it and we are able to nip it in the bud before it escalates into something that's widespread and something that's able to cause more problems, because of the training that the military has, because of the resources that they have, and also because of the military's dedication to the state and their loyalty to the state. They're able to ensure that they do this with all the loyalty and all the integrity that it demands. Is a very, very serious issue. We need to deal with it as such. Thirdly, under the advantages of using the military, it's very important to also use the military, because this is not an instance where you would want to fear that it will escalate into like a full-blown civil war or something, because what you have in Western Togoland is not even like a widespread thing. These are very few people, okay? Very few people with their own interests, own selfish interests, who would want to like break down a country. When you take in the military, you take in the full force, we're able to take out all these people and then ensure that there's peace. So because they represent a small percentage of the people, like it's a very limited area, and with the military you can ensure that you take out all these people, and that is the advantage of taking in the military in this instance. Now to my next point, which is that this situation we find ourselves in is a critical juncture. The way we respond to this issue will determine the peace of Western Togoland or that part of the country moving forward, and that is why we need to deal with it with all the force that it requires. So in terms of setting precedents, what would we want to do? Do we want to face this issue with the full force of the law, with the full force of the military, with the full force of the state, or we would want to sit at table with these guys who are criminals perpetuating criminal acts in pursuit of something that's not even justified in the first place? The precedents we need to set is to ensure that we tell everybody and signal to everybody that we will not tolerate this thing. So in order to set that precedence, two things, ladies and gentlemen. First one, tolerating this kind of thing, bringing them to the table and all that, just sets a bad precedence for others. Because as I've told you, Ghana as we have it is made up of 4 distinct areas. If you go to the table with these guys that you want to negotiate with them, the signal you are sending to all the other 3 people is that anytime you have grievances, just ignore the constitutional channels we have. Just ignore your MPs, just ignore your DCEs, just ignore your regional House of Chiefs. Go to the streets, say you want to secede, and government will listen to you. That in itself is an insult at the constitution, is a slap in the face of rule of law, and it is not something that we need to endorse in the democratic system as we have now. But secondly, and more importantly under that, when you set this precedence and everybody feels that they can succeed, what it also means is that people would also want to break themselves along tribal lines. But that's something that our entire constitution and our entire politics is very much against. That's why the EC doesn't even support you forming political parties along regional or tribal lines. So when you allow people to secede based on this same tribal and ethnic sentiments, it's a really bad precedent, and you now incentivize other people to do same. Ashantis would want to break away because they are Ashantis, Northern Territories want to break away because they are Northerners, and it's a very bad thing for the state. But secondly, also under that, when you fail to do it, then you fail to achieve deterrence, which means that anybody else who wants to secede would not feel that deterrence, or would not feel that they will be clamped down on, or would feel that they would even be let off the hook, and they might even have a privilege to meet with the president and drink tea and talk over matters and all that. That's a bad precedence. We need to have deterrence for these kind of things to prevent the country breaking down. Ladies and gentlemen, we are Ghanaians because in 1957 we agreed to form a unified Ghana. Any attempt to break down the unity we ensure now is criminal, is unjustified, and is illegitimate. The best thing we can do is to clamp down on these acts with the full force of the state through the military, and that will be in the best interest of every Ghanaian. Thank you very much, and let's send in the military.
Hello and good evening and welcome. Joseph introduced himself and said he was in Bob Jones and he's not in a good mood. My name is Nii Komey and I was in Accra Academy and I'm in a very good mood. And I'm going to tell you why this debate, why this solution should be taken below as compared to the rational nature that he's proposing. And so this evening on the issue of the Togoland secession, that's the attempt, I stand here to tell you that the use of military force is not one that should go. Before I start in this debate, I'm going to do four things. First, I'll tell you the history of the problem. I'll tell you how the problem was tackled and why we should use that same approach. I'll tell you why the alternative Joseph is proposing is not an option we should take, and finally I'll conclude and summarize my points on why I strongly believe this is the case. As an Nkrumahist and a staunch Pan-Africanist, my philosophy is built on the African philosophy, and one of which is the use of sayings by African people. In Nigeria, the writer Chinua Achebe once said, the use of force is the absence of reasoning. And so I start with this problem that we should have this at the back of our mind as we listen to how I'm going to go through the history of the case. Who are the Ewe people? The Ewe people are made up of an ethnic group that dominate the western part of Ghana, current Ghana, and stretched to sides of Togo and Dahomey, now Benin. They've lived there since around the 10th century, and we're one of the dominant ethnic groups, and before nations were built, and before colonial people oppressed and beat people into ruling them. They are historically the land under discussion this evening was run by the Germans from the time of 1884, when the people sat in Berlin to share Africa among them like a cake, until the end of the Second World War, where Germany lost all its colonies. So places like Togoland, Western Togoland now, Cameroon and Namibia were all German colonies that were taken from them and given to other people. Now, if you know the history of this case, you realize that Cameroon has the same problem that Togoland has now, and so there's continuous friction of problems between the English-speaking Cameroonians and the French-speaking Cameroonians. Namibia has been able to navigate this problem because the British took over and is a wholly British colony now. But Togoland was split among the British and the French. And so in 1955, when Ghana was about to gain independence, the trusteeship of Togoland had to be decided, and the people were given a chance to decide. Unlike the many colonies where naturally, when independence is gained, the people become a new state. These people were given a chance to choose whether they wanted to remain a single state or they wanted to join the state of Gold Coast, which was going to become Ghana. These people, in Kwame Nkrumah, the Osajefo, in his wisdom and in his goal to have a united Africa, cajoled them to join him. And with the British and the French not wanting to lose out on their control of it, which we call neocolonialism today, the people were subjected to a plebiscite. The plebiscite was to decide two things. And the plebiscite was to decide whether they wanted to unite with independent Gold Coast or they wanted to remain under trusteeship or British trusteeship until their political future was decided. Now, this group of people, after voting, this group which stretched 13,041 miles to all the way to the north of Ghana, which, as Joseph mentioned, as Joel mentioned in his introduction, straight to places like Brem, Mampusi, and the Dagbon areas, or current Boko, Tamale, Yendi, etc. They all decided to join the independent country called Ghana, and in 1957 the state was formed. Now, because of colonialism, right, tribalism arose and it was exploited. So it was used as a divide and rule tactics, whereby people were used against each other. Why am I giving this history? Because when independence came, this problem arose because not everybody was since it's the democratic process, not everybody was interested in this process. And so what did the nationalists do? The nationalists in 1955, when Ashanti region wanted to secede, Kwame Nkrumah didn't use force to beat them into line. And as much as he suffered bomb attacks, Krobedu says, which was a close partner of Kwame Nkrumah's sister was killed in Ashanti region, etc. He didn't use the military attack. Rather, he used the nationalist approach. He used three things. There was the nationalist approach, there was the social policy approach, and there was the patriotic approach. Again, in African philosophy, we have the concept of Sankofa, where we go back to our history as a way forward. And so I'm proposing this nationalist approach, social policy approach, and patriotic approach. Now, what is the nationalist approach? The nationalist approach shows that at the discourse level, at the discursive level, the expression of unity should be expressed in various sloganeering. So when independence was gained in places like Tanzania or Zambia, they had names like Ujuma in Tanzania and One Zambia and a Rainbow Nation in South Africa. At this critical point in time, where seeds which were sown, and we shouldn't forget the Biafra War, where this same thing happened in Nigeria and force was used, which brings about Achebe's proverb that I quoted earlier on, where seeds were sown. Force doesn't solve the problem. It just paints the problem, or it just polishes the dirt on the problem and grows. And so far as there are seeds that are there, it grows together. What we should do is also plant seeds of love into these things. So at this point in time, we need to aggressively go back to forwarding the nationalist approach and the patriotic approach of having a sense of national unity. Initially in the nation building, we had things like songs that were sung by national leaders to show the totality of the state we need to propose. In Ghana, for instance, there was a song that had Ekome Femo Kenoyaba. In Akan, there was a song that Omano ye me mine, Omano ye woman, Omano ye ye mine. In Ewe, there was a quote like Deka Wome, which means togetherness. It was at this point whereby people saw that there was a state of national unity that was around the space, and this is what we need to build again, because we could still tackle the people who have been judged, who are being oppressive, and find them with force, but the seeds are still sown in people. And anytime these seeds appear or should rear their head in a slight way, we need to go back to our quotes. Don't forget, after the 1967 to 1970 Biafra War, Achebe again wrote in his memoir of the war that we also realized that we must learn patience, like I said, and not expect instant miracles. Building a nation is not something that people do in one regime or in a few years. It's a very long process, and so you must have patience with it. Secondly, the social policy approach. What did the people do in a social policy approach? They built a new nation. In a social policy approach, the nation builders used three things. They used health, housing, and educational programs to foster a sense of national unity that would transcend the existing ethnic tensions created by the arbitrary boundaries drawn during colonization. Now, what causes these problems, right, is economic deprivation and lack of economic opportunities, which makes people available to be used to perpetuate such acts and activities. And so if at any point in time these activities come up, then we should again go back to what the problem is. We shouldn't solve what the fruits of the problem are. We should uproot the tree of the problem, which is in solving the economic problem that breaks the thing up. And at the beginning of independence, we were in a West economic state, and this was the approach the nation builders used to tackle this problem. We're in a volatile state than what we are in today, and if in a more volatile state in the past we didn't use a military intervention, there's no excuse to use a military intervention now, which I'll come back to later. Then what is the patriotic approach the nationalist leaders decided? The patriotic approach showed that the consciousness has to be developed, not just based on the cliche of a united country, like I've said in the nationalist approach, but one based on the awareness of the responsibility of leaders to lead. How do we achieve this? We should hold people accountable we should hold people in positions accountable for what they are supposed to do. We should end the practice of nepotism and organized ethnic bigotry against a certain people. They might laugh at the bigotry jokes we say, but slowly these jokes show seeds of discontent in them, which might not bother well for them, and which combines to form all these things we have against them. Then we should continuously build the national identity. It is from this kind of environment that a national unity will be formed. Again, these are the processes that we need to do. importantly is the Ghanaian identity, and the Ghanaian identity is the difficult one to build because we don't have the roots and the history that European nations have. And so in building this, we should understand that it is going to take a lot of time. An East African proverb says that a little subtleness is better than a lot of force, and so we should be subtle in this, not including in dealing with these people, where we create public disaffection for them through our means of using this, where the people themselves will know that they are accepted in a Ghana that is encompassing and accommodating of everyone, and know what we have here. This is what I propose. Later on, I'll come and tell you why what Joseph is proposing doesn't count. Thank you.
In 20 minutes to today's discussion, we have heard from Nii Komey and Joseph Mireku. Joseph has argued that considering the spillover effect that this sort of action may occasion in the country, it's important we send the military and treat this as an attack on the state and make sure we don't handle this with kids' gloves. Nii, with his history lectures, giving us some historical perspective and has told us that in times past, we've always used negotiations to talk to people who have felt the need to move away from this country, and so we should employ those skills again because they've proven to be successful not only in this country but across the African continent. And so, in line with the historical perspective, we ought to do what is right. The Bleo big guy is telling us to go Bleo. The Pojoba really is telling us to go with the military clampdown. But as an fan spin boy, what I'll tell you is that as a nation, we need to think and look ahead, like the fan spin motto will tell you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are moving into the second phase of today's discussion. The poll is available on your stream now. You should be voting for who you think is leading in today's discussion, who you think has convinced you most with the attempts with which we need to deal with the Western Togoland issue. I invite you to submit your comments in the comment section. We'll try to read as many that come through. I also invite you to send your questions. Remember, there's a full session where we'll be interacting with the speakers and asking them to answer questions specifically asked by you, our viewer. We invite you to join the process and be a part of this debate. It's not just about those of us seated here in this studio, it's about you out there and your contribution to today's discussion. So for the next 10 minutes, we will invite the speakers again to respond to each other's claims in respect of the debate that has already been had, and then we'll move on and see in which direction we think the government should take in respect of dealing with the Western Togoland. This is a very insightful debate, and it's one that you want to stay tuned for. We'll continue the next phase of the Hangout right after this.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to respond. But before I start, there's no point in always being blur. Okay? There's a benefit to dynamism. There's a point where you are blur and there's a point where you crack the whip. And in this particular instance, as I've been telling you, ladies and gentlemen, there's the need to crack the whip. And my job really has been made very easy for me by Nii's presentation. Throughout the course of Nii's presentation, the key takeaway has been that 3 solutions have been tried in the past. 3 solutions have been tried for the past 63 years. All these 3 solutions have failed, and that is the point of Nii's speech. Sense of national unity, sowing seeds of love, having a social policy, and having a patriotic approach, as Nii has told us so explicitly, has failed. Why? It is because the situation we are dealing with now is unique. The situation we are dealing with now is not the same situation that Nii wants us to appreciate, at least in some certain dimensions. And I'll show you why what he's advocating has been tried and has failed, and the military clampdown is the best way to go. So the whole idea that we need a sense of national unity and that we need to sow seeds of love, social policy, and a patriotic approach all have a certain characteristic. The main characteristic that all these things share, and as Nii admits, is that these solutions are long-term. But the point I'm trying to put across is that in order for you to have a long-term solution, in order for you to even have the peace and stability, in order to explore the long-term solution, in order for you to have a stable Ghana, so that over the course of 63 years, you can attempt to redistribute wealth to everybody in the country, you need to have a strong security presence and a strong security environment. Ladies and gentlemen, without the military's intervention, you can't even have that peace of mind or that peace prevailing in the state for you to attempt to correct the social wrongs or to implement social policies. That is why this response is very, very important. Secondly, also, what we have now is that it's not even the whole Western Togoland who wants to succeed. Okay, what we have now is a very tribal movement and a very ethnic movement, because as Nii tells you, Western Togoland stretches all the way from the north down to the south and nearly to the coast. But the agitation we have happening now is coming from certain parts of the Volta region or certain ethnic groups. It means that the movement you have now is not necessarily something geared towards the entire Western Togoland or in their larger interest. It is a tribal thing, it is an ethnic thing, and we do not need to give room for such ethnic and such tribal things to spring up, because the bedrock of our unity is in our shared identity. Once anybody wants to break down that thing, we need to ensure that we deal with it. So first and foremost, before you can implement long-term solutions like redistributing our wealth and ensuring that people are developed, have more housing and everything, you need peace for that to happen. But if you allow such ethnic and such tribalistic sentiments to go, you won't even have the peace to develop. That is why we need a military intervention now in order to ensure that we are able to develop. When you look at the United Nations, for example, everywhere the UN has intervened and everywhere the UN has sought to bring peace in the long run, there is first UN peacekeepers. There is first the military response to keep the peace, to ensure the stability first, before you can do every other thing you want to do. But if your response to people wanting to break away from your country, if your response to people inciting ethnic and tribalistic sentiments, if your response to people who want to take away some people that they do not even have the legitimate power to lead is to go to the negotiating table or is to sow seeds of love amongst them, then what you are doing in the long run is to break down that same country you seek to protect. So before any long-term solution can happen, you need a military response. Second thing, what we have now is a very, very small group. This is not even all the people in Western Togoland wanting to secede. This is a very small ethnic group powered by very selfish ethnic and tribalistic sentiments, and you need to deal with it now. You need to root them out. You need the military there to ensure that we nip whatever is happening there in the bud so that it doesn't go out of control. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a time for you to sit at the table and there's a time for you to crack the whip and bring in the military. This is one of those times, because this is a small group, this is an illegitimate group which is not even speaking for the entire Togoland, and this is a small group asking for things that our constitution will already give to them in terms of development. For you to have peace for long-term progress, you need to put in the military to protect that peace, and we are proud to send in the military. Thank you.
Okay, I'm back again to re-emphasize why I believe Blair is the way to go. Now, if Joseph Mireku says that the solutions we have tried have failed, then it begs the logic, because with over 100 ethnic groups in Ghana and one of the few countries in Africa, and probably the only country in sub-Saharan Africa which hasn't fallen prey to civil wars, in a civil war prone environment, then I think we need to question how people from Pope Jones understand failure. Because in going forward, let me again state this, that we have a group of people who form a chunk of our population. If after 60 years, an iota of them are the only people left with such tribalistic and individualistic thoughts, then we have done a successful job in minimizing the number of people who have these type of ideologies behind them. And so what we have done now has worked, and we should just continue to do it, because it is not an easy process and we should finish with it. And that is why I'm here to tell you why a military clampdown will not work. Again, there isn't, like I've repeated, these are things that have happened in the First, Second and Third Republic. In the Fourth Republic, there isn't any threat now that is greater than the threat that has happened in the First, Second and Third Republic. There isn't any greater threat now than what happened in the First, Second and Third Republic. As such, there could be an ease, which is like here, which even Joseph admits is just a minute factor of people. And especially in an election year, that governments are likely to take advantage of these threats, especially in opposition territories, to impinge on citizen rights, we can't allow a military clampdown on this type of people, because it might end up sending wrong connotations to the people there. In the just ended limited voter registration exercise, we saw what people who were there to maintain the territorial borders caused. Near an election like this, we might end up creating more problems than we will be trying to solve if we are to go ahead with this. These are just the little people. These are just people who are, aside the fact that they are causing trouble, they are reinforcing dead narratives. And what we have done that has worked successfully over the point in time is what we should continue doing, because a strategy that is proven is not changed. You don't change a winning formula. It has worked for 60 years. It has built a united Ghana that is an exemplary nation to all on the African continent. And so we are not going to allow a few people to allow us inflame something which should under no circumstance be a problem. Again, you see, people might be detained. You see, historically, and this is worldwide, limitations on human rights and such military clampdowns have started with good intentions, but have ended with calamitous, disastrous, unfortunate, and dire consequences. In countries like Ghana, where military have reportedly abused repeatedly such powers given them in the past, it would be uncertain and dicey how this might end up. Our military has in times past abused the power that has been given to them to ensure these type of things. They have misused the power and infringed on people's human rights. And so giving them this opportunity again close to an election, which is a volatile situation in every African country's time, we might be creating more problems than we'll be trying to solve. And so just you see, people might be detained for a long time without having any relationship with what will be going on, and it doesn't. And you see, for a president who prides himself as being a human rights president, this might not speak well. Even with the people who have been arrested for the disturbances that have happened, it has been reported that people were going to their farms, people who were going to their houses, people were just walking about in their normal duties, and the fact that they were just in clothes which were not prim and proper for a white-colored office in Accra was what was on them. They were arrested and sent to prison and awaiting trials. This could be a situation that could go on in a face of a military clampdown and might cause more problems than it will solve. Again, we have solved the use of force is the absence of reasoning, and a little subtleness does more force will do. And so we should use the approach that has always worked for us, and that continues to work for us. A military clampdown is not more important now. It wasn't important in the First Republic when these agitations were worse. It wasn't important in the Second Republic when these agitations were limited. It wasn't important in the Third Republic. Now that the job is done, it is still not important. Thank you.
Well, this has been very interesting. We've heard from both of our distinguished speakers. They've taken us sometimes on historical lines, sometimes on lines that have enlightened us and provided a lot more information. Remember that the Hangout is brought to you by Speech Forces Organization, a public interest and advocacy group that helps young people hone their advocacy skills. So if you're interested in joining this program, you should log on to speechforces.com, and then on that website you'll be able to see all the processes you need to join this platform. Media Inc., a reliable media platform, has also joined us in this program and is streaming live on their Facebook page every weekend for this program. Let me speak to you about Quidex. Quidex is providing a new way for young people to invest in agriculture. Quidex is a crowdfunding agricultural platform that allows you to invest good money and then get good returns in respect of the monies that you've invested. So if you're looking for a good way to invest your money, I recommend Quidex. Go to quidex.com and find new agricultural and agribusiness financing projects that will help you and help grow this Ghanaian economy. At this stage, I'll be taking some of your comments, and then we'll proceed to the interactive session where we ask our speakers questions that you have proceeded to ask us in the comment sections in today's discussion. The first one I want to read is from Nii Komey, who says, "Nipa, why are you trolling PJ? I won't agree with you again." That's very interesting. And Nanaye Boa Pajo says, "I like your arguments, Joseph." And Kelvin Nigogo Teria says, "Bleobini," and he seems to be very impressed by the Bleobis approach in that respect. So let's dive in straight to the questions. But please keep your comments coming through. We'll read them as and when they come on the stream. We are happy that many of you have joined us from across all parts of the world. We have viewers from Nigeria, South Africa, who have also joined us in this stream. We're very proud to have you, and we hope you keep coming. The first question goes to Joseph, and it says, this is from Nii Komey. It says, there's a general admission to the effect that Ghana as it is today is a creation of colonial oppressors. Given this fact, why must we aggressively and violently fight to keep it intact and to stop those who want to leave it for freedom? And the second question is for Nii. He says, there's a reality we must confront. The history and record of all similar agitations that have led to independence have produced unstable states that has also eventually become a security threat not only to its new citizens but neighbors as well. How do you allay the fears of Ghanaians who do not want to get a new state such as that we saw in Southern Sudan? And another one to Joseph. In what form does Joseph propose this military intervention that will not provide a platform for these sentiments to grow stronger? It is not as if there's anything to identify supporters of the Western Togoland movement. Won't any misguided attack or unwarranted attack result in casualties to persons who are not supporters of the movement and rather cause public support for the group? The last question that goes for Nii. This is from Nii Komey again. He said, Nii, are elements of a state. These elements have not been met by these individuals. Why should we treat them any better than ordinary criminals who are hauled before the courts all the time? So these are the questions that have been asked by our viewers, and these are questions that we've submitted to our speakers. Our speakers will be coming up and will each spend 3 minutes on this podium to address these questions and proceed to conclude on their substantive case or arguments that have been advanced in respect of today's conversation. We shall invite Joseph to take up the stage and answer the questions that have been put forth to him.
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. So the first question was that since these boundaries we have were imposed by Europeans, why should we violently, fight to defend these boundaries? First and foremost, the idea that these boundaries were things we got from Europeans, and so therefore they are things that should be bad in and of themselves, is a very wrong way of thinking. The idea that people in Britain colonized the US or colonized New Zealand doesn't necessarily mean that anything from US or anything from New Zealand is a bad thing, or anything that they handed over to them is a bad thing which you need to do away with, right? We look at the language we speak, we look at some aspects of our educational system and some other things that we've been able to incorporate in our culture. Because they came from the West doesn't mean they are bad, but then it's just a matter of us choosing what we want. So if Western Europeans give us certain boundaries, that does not necessarily mean that they are bad. But because we as Ghanaians in 1956, 1957 have come to accept those boundaries, and we've come to build a common Ghanaian identity which keeps us together, then it's a good thing, and it's a good thing worth fighting for. And that is why in our pledge and in our anthem, we make professions that will protect that Ghanaian identity and that Ghanaian state. So it's something that we should really fight for. The second thing is that in what form should this kind of intervention take to ensure that you minimize the casualties and ensure that you don't arrest people who are not part of it and all that? It's a very simple setup that we can have, made up of 3 main sites, okay? So you realize that the attempt to succeed has been carried on peacefully by the Homeland Study Foundation, okay? But there's also another side to it, which is coming from the Western Togoland Restoration Front. These guys are using purely violent, purely military ways of going about their agitation. So it's very easy for you to find and apprehend these guys because it's violence that they are using. So if somebody is going to their farm, really nobody cares. But then if somebody is burning STC compounds, is holding police people hostage, and then is burning police stations in pursuit of that goal, then there's a criminal, there's somebody that you can attack violently to ensure that you stop them from doing what they have to do. So the stance of government should not be to say you can burn buses, you can burn things, but then we'll mind you. But the aim is to apprehend these violence leaders and then ensure that you bring them to book. Though that's the form that it has to take. Finally, Nii was saying that, well, this peaceful resolution has worked everywhere else. So if in this tiny instance is not working, that's not failure. Well, the fact that it has worked everywhere else and it hasn't worked in this tiny instance shows you that there's something unique about this particular instance, and that is why every other solution isn't working. The unique approach you also need to take is to have a military response, because this is a criminal movement, it's an ethnic movement, it's a tribalistic movement, and it is something that does not represent every other person. And that's why there's the need to clamp it down and have a military response. Ladies and gentlemen, this is small. Let's nip it in the bud now before it goes out of control when you go to the negotiation table. And I am very proud to send in the military. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the support, not just for me, but for the Blue agenda. I'll address your questions now. The first question was, how do we allay the fears of Ghanaians who do not want to fall prey to the same situation as South Sudan? You see, again, I repeat that when the Osajefo created nationalities, this is why I should go back to the Sankofa approach, the approach we have used for a very long time. There were three things that our nationality was built on: three things: to gain independence, to gain complete political and economic independence from colonial powers, which we have done; to establish modern independent African states possessing internal and administrative structures, which we are doing; and most importantly, to create a new African identity beyond ethnic and tribal lines, which remains our last task to do. In accomplishing all these tasks would allay the fears of becoming a South Sudan. Ghana is a captain of the Pan-Africanist agenda, and we have to set an example for others to follow. Again, I say that, and I quote the words of Chinua Achebe, who wrote these words at the end of the Biafra War, which was a similar situation. He said, "We also realize that we must learn patience and not expect instant miracles. Building a nation is not something people do at one time or even in a few years. It is a long process. It's a process. If there are people who are showing agitations, then it just goes to show that we haven't completed our process and shouldn't stop working at our process, and which we must go on with." Finally, I quote what Nkrumah said when he wrote about this issue. He said, "I am impressed on the party of organizers in Western Togoland." He said that left to the people from Togoland alone, they would be willing to join the independent Ghanaian states. It's just for us to convince them that they are welcome. At this point in time, there's no doubt that these people are interested in joining us. It is just that every person should feel accommodated. You don't let people feel accommodated in a place by force or a clampdown. You let people feel accommodated in a place by love and subtle treatment. Finally, in addressing what Joseph said, arresting a people for committing a crime is not the same as a military clampdown on a place. You can arrest a people who have committed a specific crime without having a military clampdown on a place just because of, on a constituency or a part of the nation just because of that. Again, I state my fundamental point that the use of force, in this case a military clampdown, shows the absence of reasoning, which are the 3-point solution I have shown you in a patriotic, nationalistic and social policy approach. Bleu and Pan-Africanism is the way forward. Thank you.
Well, we thank the speakers for the conversation they've had with us today. I'll take the opportunity to read a few of your comments, but I implore you to continue to vote for who you think has won today's debate. The voting part is at the bottom of your screen near the comment section. So please endeavor to vote now. We'll be closing the polls in a few minutes and then we'll declare today's winner. I'll take one from Raphael Arthur, who says Tintin always does a good job. He's the undisputed defending champion. Well, it remains to be seen if Tintin will be here. Joseph will be here next week to defend a title. Jacob Johnson says, I think I disagree with Joseph's idea of what the composition of state should be. He seems to be predominantly against the idea of secession because it's a single tribe fighting for self-governance. The question then begs, will he be okay if a number of tribes unify and demand their independence? Obviously, self-determination must not be denied on the basis of tribe. If they want to go, let them go. Nana Kwame with another comment says, we have an amazing opportunity to reimagine the way the world has been conceptualized or has conceptualized statehood and independence or freedom. You will find 50,000 people islands in this world and 1 billion over countries. We should begin to embrace the thought of many more countries, and in this case of Western Togoland. It doesn't have to matter whether or not the group has the support of all historically identified Western Togolanders. Hell with it all. We need a new order. So those are very interesting comments. Niaite Aya says, it is quite strange that the gradualist approach is being referenced by Nii Komey. It is the reason why Africa has never united. So in his opinion, or in his own terms, he believes that because of this gradualist approach that Nii Komey has proposed, Africa has never been able to unite as a result of that. Samuel Keati says, Peach Forces is really doing a great job within this space. And yes, we are grateful for your commendation that has come our way. And Nakuma Chocho Connie says Pan-Africanism all the way. And that's also a very interesting one that has come through. So those are your comments, a brief overview of some of the comments that you've made in this respect. And we are happy to have you all the time with us. Join us, participate in the discussion. Let us hear from you. Let us hear what you have to say, because this is ultimately an interactive debate session. We hope that you continue to bring in your comments in the future, and we hope to continue to have you. When we return from this break, we'll be announcing to you who has won today's debate, and then we'll do a little preview to next week's discussion. Stay tuned to Media Inc. The Hangout provides a platform for young people to debate national and international issues and extend the dialogue amongst the youth. It is therefore important that you out there support this program. If you're interested in joining us and being a partner for this program, please call any of the numbers on your screen and we'll be glad to give you feedback in that respect. We look forward to collaborating with you and we hope you join us on this platform. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us on today's episode of the Hangout Debate Series, brought to you by Speech Forces and Media Inc. and sponsored by Codex. Next week, we come your way with an even more interesting discussion that will excite your intellect and engage your minds. I implore you to tell your friends and engage other people on the need to join this platform every Saturday at 7 o'clock p.m. as we engage fine and young brilliant minds in an attempt to further the discourse and open dialogue in important international and national issues. At this point, I'm ready to reveal the results, and it remains to be seen if the bad day that Pope John boys have been enjoying today will change, or the Accra Academy streak will also come to an end. Remember, they've had a very good week, and we'll see if that translates into the conversation and the way you people have been feeling in respect of today's debate. We have a very high turnout in respect of the vote share, and happy to announce that at the end of the day, in what was a very closely contested debate, 51% of you, our viewers, thought that we should employ a more subtle and a more blow approach in respect of dealing with the secessionists. So Mr. Nii Komey of the University of Ghana Department of African Studies has emerged as winner of today's debate. Many of you agree that the position this government should take in respect of dealing with these secessionists or these people clamoring for secession is one that has worked in the past with regards to the historical perspective we provided with Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, and this is a method we should employ rather than engaging in a military clampdown that may further exacerbate the situation. We are very happy for all that you have brought to this discussion, and we'd like to extend our warmest congratulations to both of the gentlemen who have engaged in this very fine debate. We encourage you to join us same time, same platform, next week for another interesting discussion. My name is Joel Telfa. Speech Forces and Media Inc. has brought this exclusively to you. See you next week. The Hangout provides a platform for young people to debate national and international issues and extend the dialogue amongst the youth. It is therefore important that you out there support this program. If you're interested in joining us and being a partner for this program, please call any of the numbers on your screen and we'll be glad to give you feedback in that respect. We look forward to collaborating with you and we hope you join us on this platform.